Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of SecPod webcast. I'm Jixi, your host. Through SecPod webcasts, we bring you the latest happenings at SecPod and exciting stuff we are working on to prevent cyber attacks for enterprise IT security teams globally. Today's session is on building an advanced vulnerability management program. I'd like to introduce today's presenter. I have with me Chandrasekhar, founder and CEO of SecPod. Chandra will talk to you about an interesting topic on vulnerability management. I'm excited to listen. Hope you're all hooked up too. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all that a recorded version of this webinar will be available on our Bright Talk channel as well as our YouTube channel. We will also send a recording to your email address after this session so you can watch it and share with others in your team. Towards the end of the session, we will have a quick Q&A. We'd love to hear from you, whatever questions you have. Chandra is here to answer all your questions. You can post your questions in the chat box just below your Bright Talk video player. For those of you just joining, welcome. Over to you, Chandra. Audience is all yours.
Right. Thank you, Jaxir. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. I know we have people joining from various geographies around the world. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be part of this session. If you're already into vulnerability management or revisiting your vulnerability management program, uh, or you're not realizing the security effectiveness that you set out to while implementing your vulnerability management program, or trying to manage your attack surface or reducing the attack surface. So I believe this session is going to be useful uh, for you. Now, VM or vulnerability management, as you know, is a key component of the cyber attack prevention layer. So if you look at the cybersecurity framework, you have prevention, detection, response, and recovery. And vulnerability management or attack surface management is one of the key uh, element as part of the prevention layer. The more you invest your effort into prevention, the less firefighting that you'll have to deal with at the detection and response layer. As they say, prevention is better than cure. I can slightly modify that and say prevention is better than detection response here. Obviously, you don't want to get into a recovery stage. You want to prevent all possible cyber attacks before attackers are able to succeed. And vulnerability management, uh, if implemented properly, will help us get to that scenario. Personally, I have been in the vulnerability management industry or cybersecurity industry for over 2 decades now, and I have been looking at this wheel for more than 15 years or so. And this is typically what vulnerability management lifecycle is all about: identifying the vulnerabilities, assessing the vulnerabilities to understand the risks involved, prioritizing those vulnerabilities that must be dealt with, and remediate those vulnerabilities, and report those uh, after remediating. Even before remediating, you want to understand, and then after remediating, you want to know that those vulnerabilities are actually eliminated. And this is a cyclic process, supposed to be a continuous process. And this particular wheel, there's nothing wrong in it. Simple, elegant. If implemented correctly, we will be able to achieve that cybersecurity posture that we all want to achieve in order to prevent the attacks. Uh, I have been part of the early Nessus development effort, in OpenVAS and SCAP and OVAL, most recently in the security automation side of the technology. And I have been seeing this particular wheel. It has not changed since then. It has been the same. And as I mentioned earlier, it is, if implemented correctly, we would be able to achieve the goal that we all want to. But the pitfall is here. Number one is vulnerability scanning activity itself takes weeks together to perform. And then when you have the scanning activity completed, you are provided with a report that runs into thousands of pages. And post that, as a security administrator or the IT operations team, you're responsible for understanding these vulnerability, uh, prioritize those vulnerability, identify what is my mitigation to overcome that vulnerability, and then apply a security patch or other remediation controls that you may want to in order to eliminate that vulnerability. And this exercise takes anywhere typically between 3 to 5 months to complete it. And that is a large window of opportunity for attackers to exploit. And we all know that there are at least 30 to 50 new vulnerabilities being discovered on a day-to-day basis. These are known vulnerabilities that have the CVE identifier assigned by NIST. But there are a good number of vulnerabilities that may never have a CVE identifier assigned, but they are still vulnerabilities that attackers are exploiting those. So this is one side on the software vulnerability, but there are risks that go beyond software vulnerabilities. Maybe security controls that are not appropriately implemented. There can be misconfigurations. There can be unwanted software assets, etc. present. So these are never discovered as part of the attack surface management initiative that we implement. And then again, even if you want to implement this lifecycle vulnerability management lifecycle process, we may have to invest in at least 5 to 6 different tools or products in order to achieve that particular goal. And each of them operate in silo. They do not talk to each other, and you need to have the resources who are skilled to handle these products, understand from one to another, and apply the controls that we want to. So the complexity is there, and that is why the effectiveness that we want to achieve is not there. Because of the manual interventions that require lack of automation and continuity in this entire process, it makes it extremely cumbersome to implement a continuous and automated vulnerability management program. But beyond that, as I mentioned, multiple siloed products operating in silo. Because of this, we won't be able to apply the remediation controls that we want to, because the vulnerability management product does not feed its findings into a remediation product, for example, a patch management product. So all of this make it extremely cumbersome to achieve that security effectiveness that we all look to achieve. And the managing or eliminating the attack surface becomes a tedious task and time-consuming task, and a lot of effort is involved in implementing that. Now that leaves us with these three questions. Question number one is, are we uncovering all the IT risks that are there beyond vulnerabilities, not just the software vulnerabilities, but other kinds of vulnerabilities? The second question is that who takes the ownership for remediating these vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are discovered, but who's supposed to remediate these vulnerabilities? That is the second question. And the third question is, why are these not continuous and automated? And everywhere else, there's continuous integration and continuous delivery, for example. And all of these are becoming the norm elsewhere, but in the vulnerability management space, the continuous and automation has not become the norm. So there is no single console where I can implement a vulnerability management program and successfully achieve that the security effectiveness goal that we all aspire to achieve. So are there security risks beyond the software vulnerabilities? Yes. So you have misconfigurations, the operating systems and the applications and the network devices are properly maybe not configured appropriately as per the security baseline that you would want to. There can be asset exposures, outdated assets present, for example, and unwanted applications, unauthorized services running. There can be critical security patches that are not rolled out, which should have been rolled out. And there can be additional security controls that may not be working as you would expect, as you want them to work. Maybe a firewall is disabled, maybe you've enabled an file system level encryption and that is not appropriately implemented, or maybe the anti-malware product that you have installed is not running properly. So all of these can be the security controls, deviations in the security controls that you have already implemented. But there can also be other types of posture related anomalies that can be present within the environment. So if you look at the attack surface holistically across the IT landscape, all of these are equally important, equally critical, and an attacker can exploit any of these with ease if these are widely open. So it's important that we deal with each of these risks beyond the software vulnerabilities themselves. Now, the second question that we had was who takes the ownership for mitigating these vulnerabilities, not just discovering all the problems and generating a report that runs into thousands of pages, but is there a mitigation available? Maybe through deployment of a security update that is available for operating systems and applications. Or it can be some of these unwanted services and ports that are open, you may have to turn them off. Or there are certain services that you want them to be running, but they're not running, so you may want to run those as necessary, as in a requirement. So without that capability to remediate those risks that are identified, the effectiveness is kind of broken and you're not able to achieve that goal. And third, and the most important one is why is it not continuous and automated? Why won't we be able to make this discovery process into a day-to-day activity and also the remediation also into a day-to-day activity? So it is essential that we make it into a continuous process because newer vulnerabilities are being discovered every day. And IT environment is also changing every day. It is not anymore an audit-driven approach where I would run a scan once in a month or a quarter, and just to meet the needs of the audit that is due. But it needs to be a continuous and automated process. It needs to be a daily routine that we uncover the risks, mitigate the risks, make it into a routine where I'm achieving that goal. So all of these three things are really important to establish a cyber hygiene posture that we want to. So without that, what we are left with is very low certainty because we don't know if we have found or discovered all the vulnerabilities that are out there, from misconfigurations to security control deviations to asset exposure, etc. Second, we don't have that sense of control that we want to have because we have discovered a number of problems, but we have not actually mitigated those problems, and it is a time-consuming process. And we're living with those vulnerabilities without mitigation. The third is not having that continuity or an automated approach to solving this problem. So what we propose in an advanced vulnerability management program is these layers: visibility, identify, assess, prioritize, remediate, and report. It's nothing different from the wheel that we talked about. But what we do in each of these layers matter the most. One is, do we have continuous visibility into the IT environment? Are we able to identify all sorts of risks that an IT environment is subjected to? Can we assess those risks, understand those risks, and prioritize those risks? And do we have an integrated remediation capability where I can go ahead and fix all those risks that are identified, and then finally reporting these controls that I have applied in uh, to fix these deviations that we found out, and have that sense of confidence, a sense of control that we have actually taken care of each of those problems that are discovered. More importantly, if you see the interface between them, each of these layers must be integrated. Uh, the findings from the visibility goes into identification layer, and that goes into the assessment and prioritization layer, and so on and so forth. And it has to be integrated as well, having a centralized management console where I'm having visibility to all of these, and I'm able to apply the controls that I want to apply uh, to mitigate those risks that are identified. So this is the framework that we propose for implementing an advanced vulnerability management program. But let's look at each of these layers and see what is really necessary from the little bit of technical details that each of these layers should have. One is visibility, getting visibility over the IT asset. When I say visibility, it is the continuous visibility. You want to know what changes are taking place. You want to know which system joined the network. You want to know if there are shadow IT and unauthorized and unwanted applications present within the environment, or if some service is running which is not supposed to be running, or some users have logged in who are not supposed to be logging in. So likewise, you will have that need to know what is going on within the environment in real time. And without visibility, it is impossible to achieve security. And that is a primary need for any organization to implement a cybersecurity posture management. Now, from visibility, it's all about discovering the vulnerabilities. When I say the vulnerability term here, it encompasses all of those, from software vulnerabilities to misconfigurations to asset exposure, missing security patches, and security controls deviations, etc. So it's important that we assess, discover all sorts of vulnerabilities within the IT environment, and this has to happen daily. And assessing and prioritizing is also an important layer. Once I have discovered all the vulnerabilities, can run into thousands of vulnerabilities, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities if you were to club all of those different types. Now it is important to assess, understand what is the risk exposure each of these vulnerabilities present, and prioritize those vulnerabilities. And in order to prioritize the vulnerabilities, you may have certain variables coming in from the external feed as well. Maybe threat intelligence telling us that this particular vulnerability is widely exploited, or it can be asset criticality itself, maybe a particular server that is running a very critical or business critical application, and that needs to be safeguarded fast. So any vulnerability in that environment becomes extremely important and critical to fix. Now, we may be able to bring in some machine learning and predictive capability as well to identify a particular vulnerability that can go on to become uh, popular in terms of how widely that is going to be exploited. And we should also have that attacker's perspective of understanding what these vulnerabilities are and how an attacker could exploit these vulnerabilities if we let them open. So all of this can be put into some sort of a scoring mechanism to understand the cybersecurity posture that we have within the environment. And when we do that, we will exactly know what vulnerabilities are there, which are critical that I must act upon immediately. What are those vulnerabilities that I can wait for maybe a couple of days? So that kind of prioritization, it will help us um, when essentially, especially when you have too many vulnerabilities that you want to deal with and you want to prioritize and act upon those vulnerabilities. The next layer is the remediation of these vulnerabilities. So typically vulnerabilities, software vulnerabilities are dealt with by applying the security updates on the operating systems and third-party application software that are installed in the environment. But having the software patches rolled out alone is not enough. There are misconfigurations where you'll have to apply the system hardening measures both at the operating system level, application levels, and even for the network devices that are present within the environment. We need to fix those security controls that are deviating and posture anomalies that could be there that needs to be dealt with as well. So some of the examples could be you have an unauthorized application installed within the environment. You may want to uninstall that particular application. Maybe the firewall policy is disabled and you will have to enable that. Anti-malware product itself is not running properly. You may have to start that. Or there can be other settings like the IP forwarding, for example, in a Linux box, you may want to disable it for security reasons. And these are hundreds of such controls that you may want to apply in order to eliminate the risks that are discovered apart from rolling out the software patches alone. So it's important to have the ability to not just apply the software patches, but also having additional controls that you want to roll out to eliminate the vulnerabilities that are identified. Once you have remediated these vulnerabilities, it is about reporting, understanding, and having that confidence that I've actually fixed all the vulnerabilities. And some of these findings you may want to feed into external system as well. Maybe a SIM product wants to know what vulnerabilities are discovered in the environment. And at times it's also critical to have some sort of an alert mechanism to know if there are high critical vulnerabilities that are discovered within the environment. I want to get an instant alert so I can act upon those vulnerabilities on priority. Now, most important of all of these is being able to automate each of these bring in the automation that is necessary at each of these each of these layers. Being able to run vulnerability scan automatically every day, being able to roll out the security controls in case there is a drift every day, and being able to apply security patches, critical security patches at least on an automated basis to some of the IT environment. So these are the automations that I'm talking about. There are significant number of activities within the vulnerability management space that can be automated into a routine. So if you were to look at that diagram once again, so all of these layers coming together on a single console, talking to each other, being able to make those decisions or help us make those decisions, and being able to automate this entire process is what we call an advanced vulnerability management. So at the visibility layer, you have continuous visibility. Identification layer, you have discovered vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, missing security patches, and other security risk exposures. the assessment and prioritization layer, we have understood the risks, and we have come up with a remediation strategy by prioritizing what are those vulnerabilities that you want to act upon. And we've also fed in additional external data feeds to help us prioritize those vulnerabilities. Maybe a particular vulnerability is being exploited in the wild. There's an exploit kit that is making use of a particular vulnerability, and the attacker perspective itself. So all of this information will help us prioritize this vulnerability in order to remediate. At the remediation layer, it's about application of the security patches, but also fixing the misconfigurations and applying the security controls that go beyond patching alone. And finally, being able to report on all of these vulnerabilities that are discovered and the mitigations that you have rolled out. And the key part of this is being able to unify them into a centralized management console and having one console to manage the entire program. So this is what is advanced vulnerability management. So moving on. So what are the benefits that we get out of implementing such a program? Obviously, the security effectiveness has increased because you're able to automate a good number of these processes, and you're able to know the risks every day, and you're having the controls to eliminate those risks, essentially managing the attack surface effectively. And we also have the advantage of being audit ready at all time. We are able to achieve that continuous compliance to either industry security benchmarks like the PCI and HIPAA, etc., but also technical security controls from NIST and CIS and STIG and all of these security controls. You will have that sense that you're able to achieve that continuous compliance to any of these guidelines. So at any point in time, we'll be able to demonstrate compliance to the auditors. And we have the integrated console where you have visibility to vulnerabilities and misconfigurations and IT security exposures that go beyond these vulnerabilities. So you have one view where you get to know all the risks that the IT environment is exposed to. And there is an integrated remediation controls that I can roll out from within the same console, depending on the type of vulnerability that is discovered. If it is a software vulnerability, vendor has released a patch already, go ahead and roll out the patch. And I see there is an unauthorized application installed in one of the system, go ahead and uninstall that particular application or blacklist that particular application. Maybe there are certain devices that are connected to the network which should not be block access to those devices. So all of these controls are available within the same console to apply. And as soon as I apply those mitigation, we will have that sense of having applied those mitigation because the vulnerabilities are eliminated within the same process. Within the same console, you have the visibility to know if effectively that particular vulnerability is fixed or not. And beyond all of this, we will be able to achieve that resource efficiency. You don't have to operate in multiple consoles, and more number of people required to operate on each of them, and reduce the cost of ownership of implementing such a program within your environment. So with the implementation of advanced vulnerability management, what we get is certainty, knowing that I have uncovered all possible risks, control, having implemented the remediation measures within the same console and having eliminated those vulnerabilities that were discovered, and continuity, because you've automated significant number of these processes into a daily routine. Majority of these are running on their own, and you still have the visibility and control that you would want to within that centralized console that we're talking. So SecPod is pioneering this journey, reinventing the vulnerability management through our SanerNow platform, cyber hygiene platform. It makes it into a continuous and automated process. It brings together multiple tools into one single console by unifying all the use cases that all the layers that we talked about into one single console, from discovering the vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, asset exposures, and other security controls deviations, but also having the tool set to roll out the security patches and security controls that go beyond patching. All of these are coming together into one single console supported by one single agent and having real-time communication with these agents to discover the problem and also having opportunity to respond to those uncovered problems within the same console in real time. And SanerNow platform works with multiple types of devices that are typically present, from Windows operating system to Linux and Mac OS, but also on virtual devices and network infrastructures that are typically uh, present within the environment. And we have the security checks to discover the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations and all types of security risks within the environment, supported by our repository of security checks that we are building in-house, but also having or enriching this discovery by feeding in additional threat intelligence to help prioritize those vulnerabilities and coming up with a risk mitigation program that can be effectively implemented. And SanerNow as a platform is available as a SaaS deployment, but also as an on-premise deployment if any of our customers are interested in on-premise deployment. So SanerNow VM is the vulnerability management module, runs a scan every day. Scans typically take about 5 minutes to complete. CM is the configuration management or system hardening module. It identifies the configuration drifts within the operating systems and the applications and servers and network infrastructure. But it also has the ability to mitigate those configuration drifts within the environment, and you can set it into an automated process where anything becomes a deviation, you have the automated control that you can apply to bring back the device into a compliant posture. SanerNow PM is the patch management module, helps patch operating system from Microsoft Windows to Linux and Mac OS. But apart from that, a large list of third-party applications can also be patched within the same console. Asset exposure module discovers the IT asset, provides real-time visibility into the computing infrastructure, but also identifies risks from shadow IT to unauthorized applications to unwanted presence of unwanted software, etc. Then the endpoint management module provides further granular visibility into the endpoint devices, knowing who has logged in, what services and ports are open, is your antivirus or anti-malware product running effectively, and we have hundreds of such checks that can be monitored in real time to discover the security controls deviations, but also has integrated remediation to fix these deviations. So all these tools are coming together within the single console uh, and giving that visibility that we need and the control that we need in order to implement an effective advanced vulnerability management program. With that, I conclude my part. Over to you, Jaxi.
Fantastic. That was Amazing, Chandra. I got to learn something new. Definitely, I'm sure everybody would have found some value from this session. So, regarding Q&A, we do have. So we'll take 5 minutes from your of yours, Chandra, to answer a few questions that our audience has. I'm just going to read out them for you, and
Mhm.
can take them from there.
Sure. Can do.
Our first viewer had this question: how is your solution different from Qualis?
All right. It's a good question. So Qualis is a vulnerability management product, and SanerNow is also a vulnerability management product. And as we discussed in our session, what we're trying to do is bring all of these use cases into one single console, from vulnerability detection to misconfiguration detection to asset exposure and posture anomaly detection and security controls deviation detection into one single console, but having an integrated mitigation capability as well, not just with the patch management, but additional security controls that can be applied to eliminate these vulnerabilities that are discovered. And we make it into a continuous process where the scans are running every day and you have the visibility into the risks, but also having the controls to deploy to eliminate those risks. And that is the significant difference between um, vulnerability management vendors that are out there, including Qualys and SanerNow cyber hygiene platform.
Perfect. The second question, I would like to know if it is possible to share the presentation with us and have a short meeting with the BDR. Thanks. Definitely, we'll reach out to you. I will set up a separate session, a product demonstration, as well as we'll share this presentation also. Another question for you, Chandra, would be: do you have an on-premise installation? How can I get an installation package?
All right. Yes, we do have an on-premise installation. Depending on the environment and the deployment method, we would be able to deliver the installation packages. So typically, we have an all bundled product that can just be deployed on a VM, for example, or if someone is looking to host it on a cloud environment from AWS or Azure or GCP, we would be able to deliver those as well, depending on the scale that we're looking at. So yes, so you can talk to us, tell us what is the deployment method that you're looking at, and we will understand that and provide the deployment package or the installation package accordingly, and we'll work with you to install those as well.
Amazing. Next question we have is: what makes this platform different from a SIEM solution?
Okay, it's a good question again. So SIM typically is for this operating in the detection and response layer, and we are operating in the prevention layer, which is about managing the attack surface, eliminating the potential weaknesses that could be exploited by the attacker before an attacker could exploit them. Whereas a SIM products would want to detect a potential exploit itself or an unwanted activity that is taking place. You want to detect that and respond to that particular incident. So it is VM or vulnerability management and security information event management are operating in two different layers. But we can feed our detection into the SIM product so that will enrich the SIM product to detect a potential problem much better. So that is the integration uh, that can be done between a VM and a SIM product.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. Hope we answered that for you. Other question for you, Chandra, is: how do you help in identifying vulnerability on OT environment?
Yes, so OT environment these days, I mean, most of these devices are connected to the computing environment. So we do have customers who have deployed within the OT environment as well. So we do discover those vulnerabilities, and we do have mitigations that can be applied in those environment as well. And one of the requirement that comes up quite often as a deployment method in the OT environment is, can it operate in an isolated manner where it doesn't have connectivity to the internet? So that is one another deployment method that we have taken. Yes, it can work in those isolated environments as well.
Okay. Next question we have is, another vulnerability management program is Tenable. What's new feature in SanerNow VMP versus Tenable VMP?
Right,
I'm imagining VMP would, be a vulnerability management
program. Yes. Yeah. All right. So Tenable, Nessus is good at discovering the vulnerabilities, and there is no integrated remediation that we are talking about. There is no natively built patch management tool and other security controls deviations that we just discussed during the course of our session. So that's a significant difference between a Tenable's vulnerability management program versus SecPod, where you have the visibility on a day-to-day basis to the risks that are there within the environment, but also have that integrated remediation controls that you can apply and achieve the security effectiveness that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My next question is, hi team. It's not. I don't think it's a question. But hi team, joined in late in discussion. Can I have a recorded session of this discussion, please? I missed the entire session. Yes, definitely. We are going to send a recorded version of this webinar to your email, so you can watch it, share it with your team, as well as we will have a recorded version of this webinar available on our website, on our YouTube channel, as well as on our Bright Talk channel. So our team will definitely reach out to you. Next question, Chandra, for you is, how relevant would be threat intelligence in a vulnerability management platform?
Yeah, so there are multiple parameters that we consider. So the threat intelligence or the vulnerability intelligence is something that at SecPod we've been working on for the last 10 plus years, building an SCAP compliant vulnerability intelligence database. And it is world's largest database. It's also being used by some of the other vendors in the cybersecurity industry as well, which is the same intelligence that we use within our platform. And not just software vulnerability discovery, but also we have a greater coverage as far as detecting the misconfigurations and other additional security risks that can be present within the environment. So that way it is going beyond the detection of the software vulnerabilities alone, but also having the detection mechanisms to find additional types of vulnerabilities. And it is updated every day. This is something that we have around the clock security research team, which is working, identifying researching on those vulnerabilities and adding the modules needed to detect those vulnerabilities timely. And the same team also helps identify mitigation that can be applied to different kinds of vulnerabilities, and it is continuously updated.
Okay, fantastic. The next question, I believe we answered part of the question, but this question is again on OT. Can the system be used in an OT system that is offline?
Yes. Yeah, which is the requirement that I was referring to, where it needs to be an offline environment, no connectivity to the internet, and you still be able to do that. Yes, we do have such deployment method as well, where it works in such an isolated environment.
Okay. Is this for free to get an installation package for on-prem, just for trial period? How long is the trial period?
We do have the trial available on our cloud platform, SaaS hosted solution. Uh, Typically, we don't provide the on-premise deployment as a trial, but the capabilities of both these deployments are equally same as far as the features and capabilities are concerned. So it is pretty easy to onboard on our cloud-hosted platform, sign up, deploy it on 10 devices, any kind of devices, Windows, Linux, or Mac. And all of the capabilities are available for a month period to try out the product.
Yeah, and you can go to our website, www.secpod.com, and request a trial, or go to SanerNow.com and request a trial. And the team can help you evaluate the solution for your use cases. Next question for you, Chandra, is: are there any built-in compliance templates, such as for HIPAA? Could I get a report indicating where assets are compliant, which assets are compliant or not?
Yes. Yeah, so we do have templates, especially for the configuration hardening or system hardening use cases, from NIST templates to mappings to CAS and PCA, HIPAA, etc. But if you look at the guidelines from PCA, HIPAA, NIST cybersecurity framework, it goes beyond the system hardening use case alone. So we have the reports that can be generated to uh, prove compliance to any of these guidelines. So such reports can be built, and you can export those reports uh, to demonstrate that compliance.
Okay. Another question is: how SanerNow prioritize the vulnerabilities? Is that based on only CVEs score, or it's considering any other parameters?
It does use CVSS core, but it also goes beyond the CVSS from the threat intelligence feed that we ingest into our platform. It'll help identify those vulnerabilities that are being exploited in the wild or being used by ransomware and malware as an entry point. So all of those are highlighted and prioritized. So one would have the ability to roll out the security patches and security controls timely for such vulnerabilities. We also have a security alert mechanism that our research team sends out frequently to all our customers to help them understand the vulnerability, understand the impact of that vulnerability, and mitigate or roll out the mitigation within the same console. So multiples of these are being used within Saner now to prioritize vulnerabilities.
Okay. And I think this is a follow-up question. Curious on how it will communicate or report on the vulnerability for those out-of-band objects. I think this is for.
Not sure I fully understood the question. How
Yeah,
it
I
will
think
come.
this is a follow-up to what makes this platform different from a SIEM solution. So the question is
Uh-huh.
curious on how it will communicate or report on the vulnerability for those out-of-band objects.
Mm,
I think we can.
I probably
Yeah, we'll
need a
need.
little more
Yeah.
information on this question. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can connect with
Okay, I
them
think we can
offline.
connect offline
Yeah.
and then take it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Then there's how does licensing work? Do you integrate with CMDB solutions?
Licensing is typically based on the number of devices that you have within your environment, network discoverable devices, and the endpoints and the workstations and servers. And we do have a monthly subscription model as well as an annual subscription model available. And the 6 tools that we talked about, based on your need or prioritized need, you will be having the ability to enable those modules and not pay for the other modules that you either are not prioritizing that, or you may have already invested in another solution. So we have that flexibility of enabling the requisite modules and the number of devices that our software is installed on.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure,
The,
Chandra, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I get an idea of your time. We have been keeping you for long. I have a couple of other questions from the audience. Would you take up two other questions and then we can wrap up? And all other questions
Yes,
we can take off.
Jaxir, I think we can still do that. Yeah, we
Okay.
do have some time.
So, okay. So two questions. One of them is: are Azure and other cloud IaaS assets covered?
Yes, so the workload, whether it's running on Azure or AWS or GCP, we would be able to cover those as well. All the capabilities that we talked about will be available for those assets.
Okay, and I think a final question for today. The VMP platform has a dynamic remediation for assets in the cloud. Is that right? Let's say to discover vulnerabilities, misconfiguration in the cloud, and remediation solution.
Yes, so we do
Does it have
have
a
the
dynamic?
yes, we do have the mitigations available for all the assets that are in the cloud. Once again, I would like to stress upon this point, which is the workload asset. Uh, we will be able to identify vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in those uh, environment, and having the remediation capabilities also available to mitigate those risks.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Chandra. And we do have a couple of other questions left, but what we're going to do is reach out to all of our viewers individually and answer them separately. Thanks for all your questions. It was really an interacting Q&A session. For those of you who had the question whether you will get a recording, yes, we will send a recording to your email. And before I close, Chandra, I want to thank you for giving us your time and talking about this subject to our audience.
Thank you, Jaxir. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this session. It's really good to receive all those questions. Happy to answer, hopefully, to your satisfaction.
Perfect. With that, we are about to end this session. So I'd just like to make sure I convey SecPod SanerNow cyber hygiene platform is an advanced vulnerability management solution. IT security teams use it to discover vulnerabilities, install patches, comply with regulatory standards, get asset exposure, implement security controls beyond patching, and a lot more. You can get a free trial going to our website, www.secpod.com. Once again, we will have a recorded session available on Bright Talk and YouTube channel. We'll also send you an email with exact URLs to the recording as well as the presentation that Chandra used today. Please keep tuned to SecPod webcast. We'll see you on our next session. Thanks for your valuable time. We wish you a happy time ahead. Thank you.